The snow had been falling since 4 in the morning. By 11, it had buried the sidewalks of Fifth Avenue under 6 inches of white silence. And Street, Patrick's Cathedral, stood in the middle of it all, like something lifted from a painting, its stone spires gray against a pale sky, its steps freshly shoveled, a long red carpet running from the doors to the curb, where 3 black limousines idled with their engines, breathing soft clouds into the cold. Daniel Hayes was standing beside the lead car, his collar turned up against the wind, watching the snow accumulate on the brim of his hat. He was not unhappy. Unhappy was not the right word. Tired, maybe. The particular tiredness that settles into a man who has been awake since 5:30, not because of anxiety but because his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, had crawled into his bed at some point in the night and slept sideways, her knees pressing into his ribs with the precise and unerring accuracy that only children seem to achieve during sleep. He had lain there listening to her breathe and staring at the ceiling until the alarm on his phone told him to get up, and he had kissed her forehead and gone to make coffee and pulled on his uniform and driven his personal car to the garage on 48th where the limousine company kept their fleet. He did not mind the work. It was steady, it paid reasonably, and it left his evenings free for Sophie. That was what mattered. A wedding on a Saturday in December was not unusual. What was unusual was the quiet. Most wedding mornings had a particular energy, florists arguing, mothers-in-law making last-minute demands, someone always running late. This morning the cathedral grounds were almost eerily still. The guests had been filing inside for the last 30 minutes. The wedding party had gone in through a side door. Daniel had checked his schedule. The bride was due to emerge and make her grand processional entrance in approximately 17 minutes. He was looking down at his phone, a message from Sophie's sitter saying Sophie had eaten her breakfast and was asking whether she could watch a movie when he heard the sound. It was faint at first. He might have dismissed it as the wind pressing through a gap in the stone, but then it came again, a low, raw sob, coming from the narrow alley that ran along the side of the cathedral between the main building and the clergy offices. He knew the layout well enough. He had parked at this cathedral a dozen times over the past 2 years. He hesitated. In his experience, wedding days contained a predictable amount of crying, and most of it was not his business. Mothers wept with pride. Bridesmaids wept from sentimentality. Once, memorably, a groom had wept in the back seat of Daniel's car for 20 minutes before pulling himself together and going inside, and Daniel had sat in the front and said nothing and handed back a bottle of water, and afterward the groom had tipped him generously, and they had never spoken of it. But this sound was different. This was not the soft overflow of happiness. This was someone breaking. He walked toward the alley. She was standing with her back against the stone wall, half hidden in the shadow of a buttress, still in her wedding dress, white silk, with a long cathedral train that was now soaking up the snow at its hem. Her veil had been pushed back from her face. Her makeup, which had presumably been perfect 40 minutes ago, was completely destroyed. She had her phone in one hand, and she was not looking at it anymore. She was simply crying with the phone pressed against her chest, her other hand gripped over her mouth as if she could contain the sound. She was, Daniel noted with the quiet precision that tended to operate in his mind during moments of stress, beautiful. Not in the polished way he might have expected from someone wearing that dress in this place, but in the way a person is beautiful when they have stopped performing and are simply present. Raw, exposed, real. He stopped a few feet away. "Ma'am," he said, quietly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up. Her eyes were dark and wet, and there was a particular expression on her face that he recognized he had seen it in mirrors. Sometimes, in the months after Claire had died. It was the expression of someone who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand. "I'm sorry," he said, when she didn't speak. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." She laughed. It was a short, broken sound. "All right." She looked down at the phone in her hand. On the screen, visible even from where Daniel stood, was a message thread. He did not read it deliberately, but the nature of the exchange was unmistakable. The particular intimacy of the language, the timestamp suggesting it had been ongoing for weeks. "No, I'm not all right." He said nothing. Let the silence hold. "He never loved me," she said, very quietly, as if she were telling herself rather than him. He loved the company, the portfolio, the access. I think part of me knew, but I just... She stopped. Pressed the phone harder against her chest. 15 minutes. I'm supposed to walk through those doors in 15 minutes. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The snow was still falling. Inside the cathedral, 300 guests were presumably seated in the pews, waiting. "If you want to leave," he said, "I can take you out the back. Right now. My car is 30 feet from here." He paused. "You don't have to go in there." She stared at him. "You're the driver. That's your limousine." "It is. If I get in your car and drive away, you'll lose the contract. The whole company will lose." "That's not your problem right now," he said. Simply. No drama in it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't even know your name." "Daniel Hayes. Emily Carter." She looked at the cathedral doors, then back at him. Something shifted in her face. A decision being made in real time, he could almost see it, the way you can see the exact moment a knot comes loose. "Okay," she said. "Yes, get me out of here." He did not waste another second. The back hallway smelled of old stone and candle wax. Daniel moved quickly, and Emily moved with him, gathering the train of her dress with both hands and walking on the balls of her feet. Twice she nearly slipped on the flagstone floor, and both times he put a hand under her elbow without thinking about it, steadied her, and let go. They did not speak. There was a particular wordless communication that sometimes happens between two people in a crisis. A synchrony of purpose that has nothing to do with familiarity. The service exit opened onto a narrow side street behind the cathedral. The limousine was parked at the mouth of the alley. Daniel unlocked it remotely, pulled open the rear door, and she got in, folding the enormous skirt of her dress around her with a kind of desperate practicality. He closed the door, walked around to the driver's seat, and started the engine. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. She had her phone in her lap. It was already ringing a name on the screen he couldn't read from the front. She stared at it for a moment, then turned it face down on the seat beside her. "I don't know," she said. "Just drive." So he drove. He took them west on 51st, then south on 7th Avenue, then over the bridge into Brooklyn. He did not choose a destination consciously, he simply drove the way he knew, away from Midtown, away from the concentrated weight of 300 people waiting in a cathedral for someone who was not coming. The snow had eased slightly. The streets were quiet in that muffled way that heavy snowfall creates, as though the city had wrapped itself in wool. The limousine moved through it smoothly, and in the back seat, he heard Emily Carter breathing. Then he heard her stop crying. He did not check the rearview mirror often. He had learned, in 2 years of driving people who were upset or drunk or grieving or celebrating, that the kindest thing you could offer someone in the back seat of a car was the absence of observation. So he drove, and the city rolled past the windows, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had, by circumstance or fate, stumbled into something larger than either had planned for that morning. From the back, eventually, "Is there a coffee shop?" He thought for a moment. "There's a place in Carroll Gardens. Small, family-run. They don't have a sign out front." "Yes," she said. "That." He took them over the Gowanus and down Court Street and turned onto a block he knew well. He had lived 2 streets over for 4 years, until Sophie's school had drawn him further into Cobble Hill.